Transforming the customer experience for organizations that have embraced the same model for hundreds of years takes patience, planning, and as always, executive support.
Our staff are trained to say the work is the work of standing there and welcoming people. That's the job. The work is to engage with customers.
Changing how patrons experience America's best kept promise, libraries, on this episode of the CX Leader Podcast.
The CX Leader Podcast with Steve Walker is produced by Walker, a business consulting firm that helps our clients unlock the potential of their customer experiences by placing the customer at the heart of all their business decisions. You can find out more at walkerinfo.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Walker, the host of the CX Leader Podcast, and thank you for listening. On the CX Leader Podcast, we explore the topics and themes to help leaders like you leverage all the benefits of your customer experience and help your customers and prospects want to do more business with you. In our previous episode of the Best Practices series, we had a fantastic conversation about customer experience within the not-for-profit context, specifically the YMCA of Greater Twin Cities. We thought we'd continue that conversation with another look at not-for-profits, but with a completely different type of organization, a library. It's safe to say that when most people think of a library, images of a quiet place with lots of books, places to sit and read, and one or two people can be found sitting quietly behind a desk, occasionally shushing you if you get too loud. Admittedly, that's a stereotypical view that's not really the reality of today's library. And my guest today has been working to change that paradigm. Alison Circle is the Chief Customer Experience Officer for the Columbus Metropolitan Library in Columbus, Ohio. And her team's goal has been to change how the library engages with their customers through transformative customer experience. Alison, thank you for being on the CX Leader Podcast this week.
Oh gosh, Steve, thanks so much for having me.
Well, welcome to the program. And I actually have been pretty excited about this not-for-profit series because I think most people can relate to these personal experiences, and really not-for-profits are the ultimate service business. You know, you really are delivering on the service. So I think the fact that some of the folks are applying this to non-for-profit applications is really interesting. Could you just, for context, tell us a little bit about the library?
Yeah, sure. Columbus, Ohio is really the most thriving city in all of Ohio, really doing great. Ohioans have long supported their public libraries, and so we have the advantage of a lot of statewide and local support. We are a large urban library. We have about 900 staff. We serve an entire county. We have about 25 locations, both urban and suburban. And we are really at the forefront of changing what libraries have been for the last couple of hundred years, as huge disruptors to our industry have really driven us to change. I've been in this position for a little over 7 years now. I was marketing director before. And in a rarity in public libraries, not only is my title a rarity, I am not a librarian. My background is in marketing and design. So there's three things still rare in libraries. One, this title. Two, someone leading the public-facing work that I do who's not a librarian. And three is still the holdover of calling our users patrons. The legacy of this library I'm proud to lead today has long ago moved away from the word patron to customers, which I think is such an important and critical step in thinking about who you're serving.
How long have you been with the library in total? You said 7 years in CX, but marketing?
Yeah, I've been here 14 years, the longest I've been anywhere. And it was really going to be a transition job from my last job when I moved from Minneapolis. And that was going to be 2 years, and I've missed that mark by about 12.
So were you in the private sector, though, at some point in your career?
I was at a highly successful, very innovative nonprofit. It was my first really long-term job. And then I worked for a global brand agency for a while, and then moved into this position, or into the marketing position at the library.
Excellent. Well, that's a great background and setup. What was your original career interest? Was it marketing?
Oh, no. I was going to be an English professor.
Okay.
And what happened is, it wasn't the career I had hoped it would be. You no doubt know what professorial life is like. It's political, it's very tradition bound,
Yeah.
and I just was not very happy in that environment. So went off. I actually worked at a rape crisis center for a long time. I ran my own publishing house, so done a lot of things. And I think all of those things are really critical pieces as I reflect on my career that have helped me be or to lead the effort here at the library around customer experience. Certainly working at a rape crisis center, you need to learn to listen. You need to learn to advocate and be responsive to people's emotions. And in my career around design and marketing, really thinking about the customer in a way about how they want to use the library or want to use our service as opposed to what a tradition has said are the rules of engagement around that service.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the concept that not-for-profits are really the ultimate customer experience business, and you're absolutely right. When you're working in social services, a rape crisis center, there's nothing really more intimate or personal than that kind of experience. So,
and I would say that nonprofits are the ultimate in that experience, but I don't think there's very many who have had the resources to pay attention to that.
yeah, you mentioned in earlier comments about the disruption that's occurred in the library world, and I think all of us who are in business can relate to the disruption going on. But I think that the library has really been disrupted. So, you know,
you said it, brother.
so before we talk about what you've done to reinvent that experience, just give us, I mean, I'm sure our listeners are already, their wheels are spinning about those, but if you could just kind of talk about how the marketplace has been disrupted quickly.
Well, we had a CEO in town here who stated it thusly, which I think is really beautifully stated. Libraries were really, their identity was built when knowledge and information was a scarcity.
Yep.
Today, knowledge and information is everywhere. So if your identity is about disseminating information, being the go-to source, well, guess what? You are not that today. And instead, information is everywhere. And, you know, even people in our most at-risk communities have cell phones.
Yeah.
So what is your identity? And the competition, oh my gosh, the competition for reading. We were looking at I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but the amount of time people on a daily basis of using streaming services is somewhere in the nature of 6 to 8 hours a day. So that means people aren't reading. So who are you now then if your core proposition has been upended? What we have really focused on is focusing our attentions on creating the library as a place that is true to the words over our front door that say open to all, that we have really invested in a customer first philosophy, trained all of our staff to target their approach to customers around 3 basic pillars and given specific examples of that, and allowed to create an environment that's warm, welcoming, relatively safe, that anyone can enter, be treated with respect. We even down to little details such as no one ever points. You have to actually escort somebody to where you're showing them, and really dedicated ourselves to the idea of, it's the people part that cuts us apart from what we used to be about, which were the things.
Right. So the shift from knowledge being scarce to knowledge being plentiful and omnipresent.
Yeah.
You've done some other unique things too, haven't you? That sort of, when we think of libraries, like you got a card, and if you don't bring it back on time, and
oh, we've done a ton of really, and one of not to be dismissive of when I first came here, but this will sound dismissive. When I first got here, and I would be in meetings, and we would be talking about our website. We were redesigning our website, and multiple departments were meeting, and the conversation was all about, well, this library is doing it this way, and this library is doing it that way, and we checked this way. And I said, but our customers don't go to those libraries. They're going to the Target website. They're going to the Amazon website. That's setting the bar. And so over the last years, through a lot of exposure to ideas, I've brought in a lot of speakers. I've engaged a lot of our staff around thinking about how people experience the library the way our customers do. Our Bible is outside in, and stop thinking about the rules of engagement that we've set up and how do we make our experience easy to use for customers. And one thing we walked away from a couple of years ago now was the idea of fines. And so we looked at it and realized, as our CEO also says, we've been levying fines for almost 150 years, thinking that was going to change behavior. How's that working out? Well, it wasn't working out because people were still either going to bring them back or not. So that is something that we walked away from in order to, it's just not the way people expect to be treated in today's world.
You've also done some other things physically with your plant too, right?
Oh my golly, I have had the extraordinary, life-changing opportunity of leading the design of 10 libraries, which we just last week opened the 10th one. We've done it within the last 5 years.
Congratulations.
And thanks. I'm a little exhausted this week, but what do you do when you're successful with 10 libraries? Oh, you build 4 more. So we're in the process of doing 4 more. But I was able to execute customer experience within design and within a building itself. And that's just been such a tremendous, such an extraordinary opportunity for me personally, and has had deep rewards in the community. The traditional library is kind of New England style with bricks and little windows. Well, how do you know what's going on in there? How do you know that's for you? So our new libraries are all glass and they're lit up so that people on the street can see their neighbors in there, can see what's happening and think that might be a place I can go. And from a customer experience point of view, being able to see what you're walking into and to be able to land at a specific spot when you walk in and absorb how you experience that facility, where you should go, what you need to do. Oh, here's another thing we've done. We've been working on this for the last several years, but you talked about people sitting behind a desk. We have no big desks. We have small kiosks, and our staff are trained to stand in front of the kiosk, and they are instructed to say hello to everyone who walks in or acknowledge everyone who walks in. Getting away from that big desk, sitting down behind a computer, we have taken all of that away.
Yeah, and I guess that's another thing that, historically we sort of didn't, quote unquote, bother the customers that were in a library.
Oh, when I first came, one of our librarians had a button that they wore that said, "Bother me."
Yeah.
We got to fix that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is that sense. Oh, they're busy, and our staff are trained and coached to say the work is the work of standing there and welcoming people. That's the job, not working on reports or anything else, sitting down at a computer. The work is to engage with customers.
And also, how have you embraced technology in the new design?
Here's my answer to that question. My sad disappointment is that, because there's always got to be one, right? There's always going to be a sad disappointment. Yeah. The library as an industry has to accommodate the needs of a wide variety of kinds of libraries at different places along the path. There isn't a lot of appetite or resources to push vendors as far and as fast as our customers would expect. So it is, I would say, from a technology perspective, we have miles to go. We're only getting to here's something that I can't control that you would just be like hitting your head on the wall. So only until recently, I don't know why they thought this, but you get to ebooks, for example. Okay, let's talk about that. Publishers don't want libraries to be able to even afford them because they're supremely more expensive than hardback books.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, even though it's a digital asset, you can only check out one at a time. Well, how do you figure that? Like my husband's an ebook reader. Oh, how come I can only check out one? I got to wait in line for other people to check it out. Well, that's ridiculous. But that's a marketplace we don't control. And there's just a ton of little things like that, that from an ease of use, from a spontaneity, from an accessibility standpoint, that still in the technology space, we have a long way to go.
Yeah, it seems to me like maybe, the tables could get turned. Maybe, just that one example you've given is maybe the libraries could end up being the disruptors on the control of digital assets.
Well, we've been working at that, and there has been progress.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
My guest on the podcast this week is Alison Circle, and she's the Chief Customer Experience Officer for the Columbus Metropolitan Library in Columbus, Ohio. A very unique position in a industry like libraries. And Alison, I want to talk about your actual CX program. You've talked about some of the elements, but just the whole architecture and what you're trying to accomplish, and how do you make sure that you're on the right track?
Well, it's a good question because I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I think we have plateaued, and I am wrestling with how do I now take this to a new level, because it's baked into what we do today. How do we keep it fresh and new? But it occurred to me several years ago that we needed to articulate for our staff, what is our approach? What are we trying to drive? What behaviors are we trying to measure, to hold people accountable to? And in my last job, I did this exact kind of thing for Target stores from an internal branding point of view. So it was something I had done before for many other companies, and I probably could have written a manifesto. I could have done that on a weekend, no problem. But then I would have written it, I would have handed it down. And so how do people own that and live and feel and breathe it and believe it if it's handed to them? So I'm somebody who likes to get things done. And in this case, I took a lot of time to allow our staff to go off and create it themselves, and involve probably 100 people in the development of what this ultimate product was of our customer first philosophy, and let people do all kinds of pieces and parts. And it's really not that long of a document in the end. But so we created this guideline, we created supportive materials. I personally was part of the training of all of our 800 staff in order to say, this is really important, this is who we are. And so we've done that. We have a customer, we just, in fact, just did this 2 weeks ago, but every year we have a customer first champion where each of our locations nominate and choose one of their peers within their location to as someone who best represents what customer first is all about. We've embedded it into our evaluations, into all of our team meeting agendas, and really baked it into the culture of who we are.
You have referenced your CEO several times. How critical is the role of the CEO in this kind of a change process?
Oh my gosh. I don't know very many other library CEOs who would have A, created such a job, B, hired me for that job. So right there, I think that's really critical. And I would say largely he has just unleashed me to do what I think is the right thing. And we've had a very strong partnership. We do have a board of trustees who are appointed by some political entities within our county. They have been hugely supportive. So it has. I have never experienced once any frustration or any sense of being held back from either our trustees or our CEOs in pushing forward this agenda.
Well, this is a topic that seems to weave its way through almost every podcast we've done, but it's not necessarily impossible to do it without top-down support, but it sure is a heck of a lot easier to do it when you have top-down support.
Oh my gosh, you can go so much farther and faster. There's no doubt.
How about the measurement aspect of it? You've been at this now 7 years. Do you have, without sharing inside secrets or anything, but how do you know that it's working? How do you know what the impact is on the organization?
I can cite two examples. Again, I think another area that libraries have a long way to go is really their understanding of data, but then I guess probably most organizations struggle with that same thing. But we had two things. We did do a community survey recently through a polling agency, and we were not the ones who did it. They took care of it all. And so the entire county, wide swath of everyone who lives in this county, and we had 91% of the people polled who said that our staff were warm, welcoming, and this whole helpful. I feel good in that environment. So I take that as one thing that at least we've been very much validated that people experience what it is we're trying to do. And the other thing is, I mentioned earlier that we have our staff standing in front of our kiosks and acknowledging everyone. We hired a national consultant to do a security assessment who said that our library is now at the top of his list of people who do it absolutely who's the model for others to follow. And he said one of the top reasons is that everyone who walks in is noticed and greeted, which is a key deterrent in any kind of security incident because people know you're paying attention. So I mean, those are not hard numbers necessarily, and I could offer more, but I'm proud of both of those.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because, unfortunately, the world in which we live today, when you're open for all, there's also sort of a downside to that.
It definitely, and I was just telling someone this morning that the thing that really keeps me up at night is how vulnerable our committed staff are in an open environment. It's just something that, it's just a sobering world today.
Alison, we've come to the part of the show where we want to get some take-home value. You've given us a treasure trove of information, particularly for anybody that is trying to transform an organization, maybe not as old as yours. Almost all of our CX professionals are involved in change management. What's your one go-to tip? What's your best tip for colleagues that might be out there saying, man, we got to make some changes in our approach to our customer experience?
Well, what really comes to mind is this idea that it's not about you. It's not about your ego. It's not about your accomplishments, particularly in a nonprofit institution that has a civic piece to it. It's about the organization. It's about your people, empowering them to execute because they're on the front lines. And if you don't show the humility of an acknowledgement of how critical that role is, you're going to be the last man standing with nobody behind you.
Alison Circle is the Chief Customer Experience Officer for the Columbus Metropolitan Library in Columbus, Ohio, and Alison has been a tremendous guest on the podcast today. Alison, thanks again for being such a great contributor.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for listening and helping me tell the story about our work.
Well, you're obviously a real advocate, not just for the library system, but for CX in general. You're on LinkedIn?
I am.
You can find her, Alison, with one L, and Circle, just like the shape, CIRCLE. Yep. So check her out on LinkedIn to her. We're all about creating the community of CX professionals. And if you want to talk about anything else you heard on the episode or about how Walker can help your business customer experience, you can contact me at steve.walker@walkerinformation.com or call me here in the U.S. at +1 317-843-8890. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the CX Leader podcast. You can go to walkerinfo.com/podcasts, and you'll find links to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and now we're on our own YouTube channel as well. Simply go to walkerinfo.tv to listen. Thank you for listening to the CX Leader podcast, which is a production of Walker. We're a business consulting firm that can help you make customer experience your biggest competitive advantage. And we're the 2019 Qualtrics CX Partner of the Year. Find out more at walkerinfo.com. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. We will see you again next time.